right, good morning. I hope you guys have had a wonderful week. Today's vlog is going to take us to the ancient biblical seaport of Yafo, and that's where we're going to start our tour here today. Today we are in Jaffa, Yafo. Yafo in Hebrew, Jaffa you guys say in English, and this is the beautiful port city of Israel, one of the most ancient port cities in the Bible, in biblical times, in ancient times. And for those of you who might know a few little tidbits of some history here, let me remind you to the story of Jonah. That's in the book of the prophets. So we know the prophet Jonah, he came to here, get on a boat and get away from God's calling to not go to Nineveh, which is today's Iraq, not go to Nineveh and warn them of the impending doom, and got on a boat here and tried to get away from God's calling and get as far away as he could from that warning of the people in Nineveh. So that takes place here. You also have the story in the Bible from King Solomon. So you know King Solomon made a deal with Hiram up in Lebanon. He purchased a bunch of materials, especially the cedars of Lebanon, and that transportation of goods came to Jerusalem through this port. We also have, not to forget, also the Nicanor gates. The Nicanor gates that were donated to the use in the temple in the Second Temple period. Those gates were donated by a wealthy Jew who really wanted to contribute to the building of the temple here in Jerusalem, and those gates actually came through this port as well. There's a very cool story about it where they were at sea. I'm giving you the rough draft. They were at sea, there was a storm, they had to toss the gates because of weight, and then the gates actually clung to the boat, and basically when they got here, to his shock and dismay, or excitement I guess rather, he found the gates had followed them all the way, and then they were able to, in the end, still transport them to Jerusalem. Again, that's a Jewish story, not found in the Bible, and that all takes place here. Let's continue. Our next stop is the Mohammedia Mosque, which is the largest mosque in Jaffa and bears the name of its founder, Jaffa's governor, Muhammad Abu Nabut. The mosque was built over the foundations of an earlier mosque in the years 1812 to 1814. In the southern wall of the mosque is installed Sabil Suleiman, whose shape is a large arc that incorporates white marble stones and pink granite. The Sabil is named after Suleiman Pasha, ruler of Accra and the commander of Abu Nabut. Okay, so our next location is St. Peter's Church, which is not to be confused with St. Peter's in Rome. This church was built in the 1600s. So the church is built on the very high point of Jaffa, right along the seaport there. And it is significant because it's actually built facing west. And many believe the traditional opinion behind the why it's built westwards and not facing east like most Christian churches that are built, because this is the church of which the gospel went to the nations. Another opinion that was brought up by our guide is that this is where Christianity and Judaism basically split and broke away from each other because of the allowance of eating or not following the Mosaic laws and basically being able to eat whatever you wanted and that kind of thing. So I went and discussed this issue with my good friend John, who is studying theology, and I figured who better to ask about this opinion and to basically give some more clarity on this than my good buddy John Anderson. So let's hear what he has to say about this.
Yeah, so Peter's vision in Yafo definitely plays a central role in the gospel going out to the nations, because this is where Peter is encouraged to actually accept the invitation of the Roman centurion Cornelius from Caesarea and to go. But if we look at it historically of the text, whether this is where Christianity and Judaism split, because this is where a vision from God is telling Peter to stop with kosher laws. That's not really historical. If you look at the text, 2 times Peter interprets the vision that he sees of a sheet coming down from heaven with unclean animals, and a voice telling him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." 2 times Peter interprets this vision to say, God has shown me that I shouldn't call any people, any human beings, unclean or unholy. And the vision is given so, in the context of the story, it's given so that Peter will accept the invitation by Romans who come to the city of Yafo to invite him to visit a prominent Roman centurion in Caesarea to tell him about the gospel. So the controversy is not about, in the story of the historical book of Acts, is not about eating kosher or not eating kosher, but it's about visiting Romans. Because Jews at the time, their entire surrounding world was essentially pagan, and everyone worshiped paganism, and so Jews did not visit the homes of pagans. And Cornelius in the book of Acts has an angel that visits him and says, "You're very good to the Jewish people. You pray to God. You're what at the time was called a God-fearer, a devout man he's called, which was a big movement in the Roman world at the time of people who were interested in the God of Israel, but not converted to become Jews. So Cornelius is one of these God-fearers. And he also understands enough that he's not going to invite Jews to his household normally, but an angel tells him to send for Peter from the city of Yafo, or Joppa, depending on the Greek and the Hebrew there, and bring Peter to speak to him in Caesarea. And Peter himself interprets the vision of the sheet from heaven to be about people, not about food. And then again, when people ask him in Jerusalem, his fellow Jewish friends in Jerusalem ask him about the story, they say, what have you done? And Peter again says, God has shown me that we should spread this message to Gentiles also because of the vision that he has. So Peter himself in the historical book of Acts doesn't interpret it about kosher. Later church tradition and theology interprets the vision to be about canceling the rules of kosher for everyone. But that's not really historically the context of the story. So it's true, the church in Yafo significantly faces west because of this story of this Jewish movement in the 1st century becoming an international movement to the nations. But it's not about the splitting between Christianity and Judaism that happens later in history after what's called the apostolic era.
So our tour continues as we go and visit the artist colony in ancient Yafo areas, the old streets made with this amazing sandstone. One of the interesting things that you'll find here, besides all the artistic little art shops with jewelry and paintings and whatnot, is you'll also see a little bit of an expression of artistic politics, I guess you could say, and that comes out here as well. Our next stop is the Jaffa port, the modern port that you can see here today that is still in use from biblical times. And here you can see a beautiful example of both the old and the new built in harmony right next to each other. All right, after a long day of touring, we finally get to wind down and get ready for our trip back home. All right, that's it, folks. Now we just have a few hours in traffic and we'll be back home.